this is an incredibly unique opportunity for me because I'm sort of trying to articulate something that I never really articulated in public. I just broadly, I'm industrial designer, design furniture and lighting, and things like that. But before I did any of that, and then sort of parallel with my studio practice, I'm a music guy, and I mean, in a lot of different forms. I have lots of records and musical instruments, and I've played music my whole life. So it's a big part of who I am. It's not something that I get to talk about very often, but so you're going to bear with me. And I thought, since I've never actually formalized this, I think, format here where you guys get to see, well, it was going to be my sort of messy, cluttered, shitty desktop, but now it's yours. So I feel like this sort of format is lends itself to something that I'm sort of working through in sort of real time in front of you guys. So there's going to be a little bit of jumping back and forth in time and
just don't close the tab so we can have access to that later in the studio.
Exactly. Okay. So I tried to make sense of this. So I don't know if you're here for the more formalized, design lecture, which in some ways is a little bit more canned and in some ways maybe a little bit more predictable. I'll cover all of my design work and I'll sort of touch on a bit of my personal life, and there will be a moment where I talk about music. So, let's see. I guess I've always been interested in music. I can't really figure out what came first, if it was music or design. It was always sort of around. My mom played piano. We had this kind of 1940s sort of upright piano in our living room, and I started taking piano lessons. I don't even know when. I was little, and my mom made us do it. I have a younger brother, and he stuck with piano. But I, at some point, started playing the cello. So I studied cello from probably third grade or something up until, I guess, the middle of high school, until I got into guitar, and then it all sort of fell apart there in my mom's eyes. It sort of coincided with me expressing sort of a real interest in desire to be a designer. So I think in some ways, it sort of, she was disappointed that I stopped playing the cello and sort of maybe freaked out that I was playing in a band, but she got over it when I went to art school, and she's like, okay, he's got his shit together and he can sort of do this. And then we'll come back to that later because there was like a moment, 10 years on where she did have sort of a meltdown, and and that determined the course of my design history. So again, this is going to go, we'll start in high school. I sort of numbered these, so this is high school. And I guess I can just open all these. We'll see what happens. And also I'm sort of on my heels right now because the keyboard's laid out a little different than I'm used to. I don't know how to press shift, but this shift? No.
It's command.
Wait, command is shift.
Command?
No. Okay. Wait, what does this do? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is all the stuff from high school here. How's it going to open it? Not really sure. Okay. So, I got a guitar from my brother-in-law, who's now this is just going to get real personal and weird. So my stepdad, my mom, I lived with my mom. We moved back from Japan, and I was living in the suburbs with my mom and my younger brother, and she married this guy Tom, who was this crazy, he had a Camaro, and he would sit out there and smoke GPCs, walking our dog, and he was this total crazy guy, all these tattoos. He was in Vietnam. He was just whoa. So he got me really into he was my mom was sort of into classical music. She would take us to go see the Jupiter Symphony or whatever, and that was sort of interesting. But then he sort of brought in this whole rock and roll sort of thing into our house, just because we were at once in awe of him, but also kind of scared of him. He was just who the fuck's this guy, and in our house. So his daughter, my stepdaughter, who I never lived with, she married this guy Steven for a little while. And Steven, for whatever reason, thought that it would be a good idea for me to for him to give me his old electric guitar. So he gave me this guitar. This is not the actual guitar, but it was this same guitar. This is just from, the internet. So he gave me this guitar, and he gave me this amplifier here, PV Backstage Plus, and he gave me this book, the easy recorded versions of Jimi Hendrix Are You Experienced? So that was happening. I can look at this. Okay. So, back to Tom. Whoa, sorry. It's loud. Turn it down a little bit. Because I can probably play and talk in the background. So this is the kind of stuff Tom was into. He was like, you know, it was all sort of a certain time, you know, he was into, I don't know, he was just into being a Vietnam vet, and he had a Harley and would get these like really racy motorcycle magazines sent to our house. So he was always just sitting in the garage like listening to the Rolling Stones. And this is the first record that he got me when he came into our house. He was like, you need to hear this. This Sticky Fingers is probably my favorite Rolling Stones record. It's always up for debate, you know, if you're a Rolling Stones fan or a Beatles fan. For me, I've always just been a Rolling Stones fan. I like songs that have like a beginning and the end and an end. I like early Beatles stuff when they're singing like 3-minute love songs and things like that. When it gets more into the expansive, you know, later stuff, White Album. I don't even, I mean, up to Revolver, it's pretty good. But then after that, like, it gets a little bit too psychedelic for me. So I'm sort of firmly in this world of just tight beginning and end, early Rolling Stones. So that happened. Then he got me these things. And then I got into Jimi Hendrix in a big way, and this is probably the first thing that really got me into just wanting to play guitar. Like with the Rolling Stones, I would like to listen to it and things like that. And this is from, it's sort of like his first show, you know, like live in Monterey. He went, you know, he's from Seattle. He just does this sort of, you know, the Chitlin circuit or whatever, playing down in the South with like, you know, whoever. I don't know, he played with Little Richard, he played with all kinds of people. And it was before he was sort of Jimi Hendrix as we know him. So then it took him going over to Europe and to Britain just to basically find his band. He was managed by Chas Chandler from the Animals. And he kind of created this big buzz over in London in like the 60s, in like the swinging 60s. You know, he was like, and everybody would go to see him. It was like the Beatles would be like, oh man, did you hear this guy, Jimi Hendrix? They'd want to go see him. Eric Clapton would go see him. All these people, and he generated this huge buzz. But he was still like, no one knew him at home. He came to the U.S. and did like a tour opening for the Monkees, which, if you're not familiar with the Monkees, they were like a manufactured sort of TV pop group. You know, this huge disconnect. No one understood what to make of him. So then he came back in like 1967, and he played at the Monterey Pop Festival. And, you know, he just, I think there was some, I don't know how true this is, but I guess it was, they were trying to decide who would go first, if it was Jimi Hendrix or The Who, and The Who are already this huge band. So I guess they flipped a coin, and Jimi Hendrix lost. He wanted to go on second, you know, just to like blow everybody out, but it turns out that he had to go on first. And so he was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to like, you know, blow you guys out of the water. So he played first, and this is the first song of his first set in the U.S., like in a major way. And this happens to be my kind of all-time favorite Jimi Hendrix song, which is just kind of a really basic kind of blues thing. And these are people freaking out, you know. This is like some real.
In the other Monterey.
Yeah, so this is just amazing. And if you haven't seen the whole footage, of this whole set is crazy. I mean, this is like this. It culminates in the sort of iconic image of him lighting his guitar on fire on stage and smashing it to pieces. You know, and then the Who are just like, whoa, what the fuck happened? We have to like go up there and do it now. And there's all these kids like in the audience. I mean, this is basically a glorified like folk festival. I mean, it was like, I don't know who else was playing. You know, fucking Mamas and the Papas or whatever, Simon and Garfunkel. So it was just like really wild, you know, to see this. And this sort of cemented his like reputation as a crazy live performer and something that he would actually ultimately like get really sick of. You know, he would in some ways he was sort of exoticized as this like wild man, you know, and people like would go to his shows expecting him to be like humping the amplifiers and playing with his teeth and lighting shit on fire, but he was just like, you know, he's much more than that, but he just turned into this kind of exotic sort of thing. So, back to the slides. Here, I don't know what's next, we'll see. Okay, that's me. So then, this is in high school. So this is my first band, and that's me. That's Ethan, that's Matt, and that's Dan playing the drums. They're kind of my oldest best friends. Actually, I have a company, which I can talk about more in my lecture, that I started called Field, and it's actually with Dan. He plays drums back there. We've been friends since we were 13. And, you know, I lived in his daughter's bedroom for like 6 months, like when I moved to Chicago. So we're just like kind of brothers. Same with Matt and Ethan. And we had this band, and this is us playing like our high school talent show when maybe we were freshmen or something. And we started playing Jimi Hendrix covers, and we sort of evolved into some sort of really crappy like punk band. It was like a bad scene. Somewhere there's actual footage of this. Like this is, I had to sort of do. I was a little on my heels when I'm preparing this. I mean, this is some archival, deep cuts. I don't know how to access this footage. This doesn't exist on the internet. I don't know. It looks like a screenshot from something. So then after this, like in my hometown, I grew up in the suburbs.
What year was that?
That was in 1994, maybe.
Okay.
So. In my hometown, in the sort of mid-90s, there was like...
Connecticut.
In Connecticut, yeah. So I grew up in Connecticut. If you're not familiar with it, it's like 4 hours by car north of New York City. And it's, I mean, there's a part of Connecticut where everybody's like, oh, this is, you know, super wealthy, like down towards New York City. It's like really affluent and everything. But if you can get off that little part of it, it turns into just sort of a regular state. And it's pretty small. And I lived right in the middle in a suburb of a very unspectacular city. And I don't know if it was just regional or whatever, but there was like a lot of sort of, not quite punk, maybe like pop punk, but kind of just like ska bands was like a really, like a big thing that was happening. Especially in our town, there was like a couple really great radio stations. So there was a radio station, WRTC. It was like a Trinity college radio, and they had this show. It was just like a college radio thing, and they would play ska and like pop punk and stuff like that, and hardcore as well. So then, I don't know, we sort of evolved from this into a different type of band. I don't have any footage of us playing here, but this is basically one of the bands that we play with. They also went to our high school. No one's ever heard of them, but you can kind of get the vibe of what it was like. You know, this is a venue in New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale University is. It's about 40 minutes south of where I grew up. But this is the general vibe. Basically, you know. Yeah, Cyber, the whole thing.
That's very nice.
Jinkos, like the big pants, like the whole thing.
Wow.
So,
Styling.
yeah, this is pretty real. So we started a band. Around this time, and we'll just let that go in the background. You can see, we'll watch it unfold. anyway, so it was pretty wild. I mean, it was a great scene. It's like they were all sort of all ages shows, sort of in the sort of DIY punk thing. I mean, it wasn't quite like explicitly straight edge, but it was just, everybody's like 16 and 17 years old. So there were shows in the basement of like, churches and things like that, just in the suburbs. And there's sort of a network of people that were putting together DIY just punk shows and things like that. So we kind of got interested in that, and with slight reformation, Ethan wasn't in the band anymore, Dan got kicked out, and then we added some other people, and we had a singer, and he thought that this was a good name. He was like into weird stuff, so he named the band the Infamous Nomosexuals, which is a reference to, I guess, people that are into having sex with garden gnomes or something. And we're like 15 or 16 years old, and he thought this was a great idea. So we recorded a cassette in our basement, and we started giving them out to our friends. This is a weird footage, some weird footage. We had a bunch of horn players. It was sort of fast ska, sort of punk. You were playing in somebody's garage somewhere, and we would drive around. I mean, we had just gotten our licenses, so we would like drive, Massachusetts. Within like our parents would let us go within like an hour or 2 hours from our house. We couldn't really like do a tour at that point because I don't know, they were just not that lenient. So we did all of this. We played with these guys and played at those places. Then we recorded a CD for some reason. We called it Paralela. I don't know. It exists on Discogs. I mean, it's like, you probably will never be able to find a copy of this, but it's out there. So, like, as we got into, like, later into high school, I mean, we went to Boston and spent, like, a week in Boston and, got a friend's brother to buy us, like, a bunch of booze, and we were, like, 17 or 18, and it was really fun, and it was a great time with a bunch of great people, and it was really easy. I don't know. Anyway, that got me interested in recording and just playing in bands kind of more seriously. It sort of also coincided with my interest in going to art school. So, in 1997, earlier, I decided I wanted to go to art school. I applied to a bunch of art schools, and in 1998, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island, and that sort of put my kind of music stuff on hold for a little while. Just a quick, what happens here? Okay. So going back to, where are the images? No. Okay, so we're done with that chapter. Chapter 2. Which is RISD here. Oh no. Anyway, I went to RISD. This is just a couple of this. I just lived with like 12 people, and we just had this house, and we'd just sit there and, drink 40s and do whatever, had this house. And this is the people I lived with, and what art school was like in a nutshell. So moving on, that was quick. So then I didn't really play music in college. I was still interested in like listening to tons of music, but I just couldn't get it together. So then after college, I was dating this girl. I moved to Portland, Oregon for a year. I'd never been there. It seemed like a good idea. It was always Portlandia, but it was before it was like a pop culture phenomenon. It was just like Portland. It was just, you'd go there and there were like birds on things and like all of that stuff, but it wasn't like the thing it is now. People weren't moving there. There wasn't like a show there. It was sort of just this weird little city that was kind of quirky. So I moved out there, and she was going to move out there, and we met at RISD, and then she was from Washington D.C. or just outside of Washington D.C. And she's like, I'm going to move out there, and then she said, I'm not going to move out there. So then I came back to the East Coast with my tail between my legs, really resentful. And I always look at that, on my phone. I still have like a Portland area code, and I'm really holding on to that. It was a really great time in my life. I moved out there with a bicycle and a suitcase, and just whatever. I made pizza. I did like just random things, and it was really fun for me. So let's see if I can do this again. Wait, shit. No, okay. So I moved back to, these might be small format, low res. All right, so I moved back, and these aren't in the right order. Let's rearrange them. Let's do that. Okay. So then I moved to Washington, D.C., and it's really depressing. I was like living in her parents' basement in the suburbs. But she she studied film at RISD, so she was into whatever, making movies and things like that. So she met this guy here, Scott, who had a small production company, like he was kind of a fuck up, basically, but he had some money, and he had this small but thriving, like, no, thriving, that's a strong word. He just had a production company that did commercials and stuff like that, but what really wasn't his strength, you know, he was just sort of like this kind of more of a visionary kind of person, and he was a huge, you know, music guy. He lived in Athens, Georgia, and he had this idea or this concept to make a television show for kids that adults would also enjoy watching, that featured sort of bands, you know, popular bands and also some not so popular bands. So he created this show called Pancake Mountain, which started, I guess, maybe in 2003 or 2004. I moved to DC in 2003, and my girlfriend at the time was already working with him. So through Scott, I kind of came to DC with a job. I was building sets for like commercials and theaters and just basically sort of odd jobs, hanging drywall and doing random things. And I sort of got involved in this show, and it started just more from this kind of combined a few different things I was into. I mean, a little bit of the art and sort of design sort of world. At this point, I wasn't really doing any design work, but I got involved in this show, and this is kind of a bunch of the people. Some of these are actors. Everybody just did it for free at this point. There was no money in it, and it was sort of riding on this sort of leftover, the remnants of like the DC sort of hardcore sort of scene. So a couple of these people had been in bands, you know, Discord bands and things like that. So we had this show for a while. I can pull up some clips, but you know, this is this place I worked at, and that's me. And I don't know, we painted these pancakes, and you know, there's no budget. You're just doing it whenever you can, and it's me operating a puppet and some sort of pickup truck, a lot of different scenarios. So I can pull up some clips, and it was really a great time because there was no money involved in it. We just did it for. I'm going to close these other ones. This will be better. Oh shoot, I shouldn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, I can. Oh.
It's always going to be history in the browser.
Okay, we'll archive this. So it was great. I mean, I think the early days were really, really fun and enjoyable. You can kind of just do whatever you want. He had some cameras, some lights, and we would just kind of, his whole thing, for better or for worse, and this is something I'm sort of taking with me as a professional, but he was always like, don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness. So you just kind of do what you want, and then you say, I'm sorry. Which is bad, you know? Which is a kind of, I don't know, it's a good and bad way to sort of live, but when you have sort of nothing to lose and you're sort of just being scrappy about the whole thing, it's just how you get things done. So here's a trailer. This is actually from the PBS Digital Studios. Eventually he moved to LA, and this was like 5 years ago, and it was sort of picked up, like J.J. Abrams, the director-producer, was a big fan, so he like led Scott his studio and cameras and things like that, and allowed, and it ended up getting on like PBS, which is the public broadcasting in the United States, but it's just too amateurish, and we couldn't really figure out how to get it together. At that point, I was not really involved in it as much, but this is a trailer. You can kind of get the idea of.
If Fellini and Monty Python decided to make a kid show, it might look something like this. Welcome to Pancake Mountain, a show that will make you laugh, sing, and most importantly, think, wow, PBS Digital Studios has got to be the coolest place in the world. What is Pancake Mountain? It's a magical place where musicians and artists rule the land, performing skits, duets, and of course, dance parties. Not since Don Kirshner has there been a program that refuses to relegate bands to the last 2 minutes of the show. It's a program that will finally make your kids second-guess the idea of becoming rock stars. Only a show named in a Waffle House by members of Fugazi could bring this kind of credibility to a puppet and a group of ill-adjusted adults. From cooking lessons with Jesus Lizard frontman David Yao to music lessons with widespread panicked Dave Schools, Pancake Mountain promises to teach you nothing and delivers on that promise time and time again. With scripts that could easily have been written by a room full of monkeys, it's a trippy, nonsensical, and barely approved answer to today's dumbed-down children's entertainment. We educate through music, art, and the wisdom of a narcissistic goat puppet named Rufus Leaking. So the next time you have a few minutes to kill, and you're looking for something different to share with your little ones, look no further than the unhinged madness of Pancake Mountain. Pancake Mountain, better than a stick in the eye. Usually.
Wow. Close to you.
Alright. So it was pretty wild. Like, it was basically, we would just like call, like, people would come to DC and play shows, and we'd just be like, hey, we have this thing, you know, can we do something with you? And like, I think we just caught a lot of people, I mean, that now I look, you know, I'm just like, wow, you know, that at this moment in their careers where they were just whatever, down for to do something, and the show was different enough. I mean, at that point, like, White Stripes are like huge, but it's also like, they don't get that many calls about, hey, do you want to like come in and interact with this puppet? And you know, so I think that they were generally interested in it. And we had, like, you know, Katy Perry before she was Katy Perry, and, you know, I mean, whoever. But then there was also, you know, like, you know, Deerhoof, or like kind of just this weird small bands, you know, that just didn't have the same sort of exposure, and they're sort of right next to each other in these psychedelic episodes. I mean, it has, I don't know if you're familiar with that Tim and Eric show. It's kind of this weird kind of show. Anyway, there's a bunch of clips. We don't have to watch Katy Perry do her thing. This is probably my favorite. So this segues into, I guess, what's next. So when I moved to DC, I didn't really know much about the music scene there. I was just sort of working this craft job, working at Pancake Mountain, was being surrounded by music, but I really wasn't playing that much. So I can show you, this is embarrassing, shittyapartment.jpg. This is where I was living at the time, and it's embarrassing. Anyway, we don't have to look at that too long. I was with, like, I lived with my girlfriend and a few other people, and we just had junk everywhere. So that's my life in 2003. So I was doing whatever, and I met this guy, Brandon, at a show. He had tattoos all over. He was just Brandon. And he was like, can you help me do this thing? I got a friend, and we got to, like, hang this drywall and frame this thing. And I was like, okay. So they give you like $15 an hour. I was like, all right. And then I went there, and we were just kind of hanging drywall or whatever. And he didn't really know much about me. He just knew that I could, like, swing a hammer. So I was listening. I put something on. It was like, I don't know, I'm telling you about this. Yeah, it was like, I don't know, Mahavishnu Orchestra or some like proggy thing that like either just like music, like record nerds listen to, or like musicians listen to. It's just like really not that pleasurable to listen to, very virtuistic, you know, electric violin and things like that. It's a little intense. But I just decided to put that on, and then this guy came out and he was like, oh, you know, hey, what is this? You know, and then we sort of hit it off, and it turned out that his name was Brendan Canty, and he was the drummer for Fugazi, and he was like the guy that we were making this thing for, or building this room for. So we got to talking, and then he was like, oh, you play music? And he's like, and then whatever, we hit it off like that. In parallel, I also, with my girlfriend in that shitty apartment, we happened to be owned by the singer from Fugazi and his girlfriend at the time, or girlfriend now, Ian Mackay and Amy Farina. They had a band called The Evens, and they did this video for Pancake Mountain, which is 1 minute and 41 seconds. We can watch the whole thing. But I like it. This is like our friends' kids and stuff. that's Ian, and he was in a band called Fugazi, and if you're not familiar with them, they're a very formative band. So he started Discord Records when he was like a kid, and he played in, other bands, but before this, the big one was Minor Threat, which is sort of was basically created sort of hardcore music as we know it. He was also sort of the founder or somebody very involved in just the creation of this whole straight edge movement. And so, believe it or not, this is the same guy, and this is also 1998, but so that's Ian from Evans, probably 15 years earlier. And they were just known for crazy shows. All their shows were like $7. They would never pay more than $5. They would never pay more than that, or they would never charge more than that. They were always like all ages. There was never any drugs or any alcohol. So that's Ian, and then the drummer, this Brendan. He was the guy that I met that we were hanging drywall for again, like 15 years later. At that point, in 2003 or 2004, Fugazi played their last show in like 2002. The bassist Joe, he was living in Italy in 2004, and then he lives in New York now. So they're very important.
Very.
Very important. Very important. So after that, I was hanging drywall with this guy Brandon, tattooed all over, and then I was playing for this guy Brendan. It's a little confusing. So at the time, Brendan and Brandon were playing together, and they were looking for a bass player, so they asked me to play bass. And that was sort of how I sort of got back into playing music, either just writing or recording or playing shows or whatever. So this is Brandon. He grew up in Kansas City, and he played in a band called Boys Life. This is 1996, and they were more kind of in the emo sort of world. They were really popular in the Midwest of the United States, and they toured all over. We don't have to watch much of this, but they were really good. They have this crazy, weird cult following with a certain kind of dude, pretty much. It's like kind of, I've only met dudes that ever liked this band. Anyway, that happened. So we started playing shows together, and so there's Brandon, and I, and at some point, we played probably for like 6 months with Brendan, and then Brandon, the drummer from Fugazi, he had a couple kids. He was also starting a production company, and they ended up doing, making music documentaries about Wilco and other bands like that. So we kind of put together a new band, and here are some pictures of my life with Brandon. So wait, how do I do this? So Brandon, he was like a really great songwriter. This is him, just skateboarding and somewhere in Florida. These are out of order, so I'm going to have to go through and make sense of this. So I had never done this much touring, that much touring at that point. So he had like this Astro van, and this is what we would haul plywood around in before we spent like 10 hours a day in it. And basically, it was this kind of, I think touring, I didn't realize it at the time. In hindsight, I can sort of put it a little bit into perspective and figure out why I didn't love it that much. But basically, you get in that, and then, you're just waiting and waiting all day to do like the most exciting thing that you could imagine doing. But that thing only lasts like for an hour or an hour and a half, and the rest of the time you're just sort of at the mercy of the other people in your band, and you're just waiting to do something. So it's like, I think people would ask me, they're like, "Oh man, it sounds like so much fun." And there's like, it's definitely fun, but like, it's kind of like, so you get in the van, right? And then you sit there and you drive, like, okay, I'm trying to imagine, like if I were going to explain it. So just imagine like waking up and getting in your van and driving around the block for like 8 hours. And then like pulling up behind like pulling into like the shitty, darkest alley that you can find that smells like urine, rats, and dumpsters. And then like carrying like a bunch of cinder blocks or bricks or something up like a really steep flight of stairs into a bar, and then just sitting there for like 5 hours, like in the crappy bar, and you could drink as much as you want, and then you do something really awesome, like the best thing you could ever imagine, for like an hour and a half, and then you could probably hang out for another 3 hours and you wait for everybody else to do something, I don't know, and then you carry all your bricks down and put it back in the car, and then you drive for like 2 more hours, and then you wake up on somebody's floor that looks like this somewhere. I don't know, random. You're just like, and then you just do it again for like maybe a month or something. And it was really fun for a while, like when you're 24 or 25, and it was fun, you know. And then, you know, you get paid what you get paid. You know, it wasn't much, but you get your meals paid for by the club. You know, it's just a lot of this, just like being in here a lot. And it was also a little different then. This was pre-smartphone, so we had to do things like this. Well, there were a lot of maps, you know, and you can't like, like this whole zone in here where there's like no lines. It's like, there's, how do you, like, what's in there, you know? Like if you take a right into that quadrant, it's like, I don't know what happens in there. You just have to ask for directions. So it was a lot of looking at maps, and we'd print out these things, or not print out, but it'd be like, okay, we have to be at this place at 2 p.m. You know, it was very lo-fi, and we would just do it. So that was fun for a while. And then Brandon, I don't know, something changed in his life, and he decided not to play music anymore. So around that point, the guy Brendan from Fugazi, he was like, oh, you know, you should talk to my friend, you know, this guy Benji, you know, you should play with him. So that was exciting because Benji, he was this total weirdo, like smoked way too much weed, like he was his own worst enemy. But he was so talented, it's a classic example of like meeting somebody that's like so talented, like just beyond comprehension, but just can't get it together and just like, I don't know, it shoots themselves in the foot for whatever reason, because he was just like an amazing talent. But anyway, at that time, he just made this record, he kind of recorded it with a friend, and somebody at this British label heard Domino Records, and they are huge in England and in Europe. They have like, I don't know, Franz Ferdinand or Arctic Monkeys and all these things. So they were opening an office in New York, and they decided that he was interesting enough that we would go up to New York and play a show. So it was me and his girlfriend playing drums, and Benji, and we went up to New York and we played a show for like the record kind of executives, like classic, you know, whatever, behind the music thing. And then they signed him. It was really exciting. We recorded a few more songs, put out a record. It did pretty well, but you could already see the kind of relationship between him and the label starting to unfurl a little bit, just because he was a little bit weird. So here's just like an interview with him. Well, actually, wait. Sorry. What is this? Well, so I'm gonna do a little segue. I think. Well, this is from the second record we did. So we recorded a bunch. We went to Nashville and did this whole thing. You know, did the whole band thing. So here are some pictures of that era in my life. I don't know what this is gonna be. That's me. There. That's Benji there. This is just, you know, how it is. This is like asbestos particles, some kind of carcinogen floating down from the ceiling. Kind of hot. Everybody's kind of sweaty and mad at each other. And this is, ended up getting this big band together. So our friend Amy played cello, and, you know, we got to do some fun things. Went to the Motown Museum in Detroit, played some TV things. Let's see what else happened. It was also fun because we got to go to Europe. You know, I'll play his music in the background since there's no video for this. He's got the whole thing. It's really amazing. And it's not all like this. So one of the best things about going on tour in Europe is that they treat you a little bit better. They still don't pay you anything, but the food is exponentially better. So we got things like roasted chickens, Very good. Whatever you want, you know. That's me, and I was smoking cigarettes at the time. This is the band at the time. That's Benji, like the main guy, and that's Drew, Laura, Amy, and that's me in the back. And that's Drew playing frisbee. It was all very, you know, classic band stuff. So, what else is this? How are we doing on time? Are we good? Is this
Good.
thorough enough? Not too thorough? One more information? And then we recorded this record that this song is off in Nashville. We recorded with this guy. He recorded Silver Jews and like a bunch of bands, and we recorded at his house and did this. That's Benji getting weird. Let's see, I'll kind of make it a little bit. So like right around this time, things got pretty weird. Like he got into this like child star from Disney, like Bobby Driscoll, who had some sort of tragic story. He got like obsessed with him, like, and so he named the record "Come Back to the Five and Dime, Bobby D, Bobby D," and that's the record. I think is amazing. It's a really great record. It's like an hour and something long. This song's from that, and I'm really proud of it, you know, playing on it and helping him realize it. But he kind of got weird, and he started to like get this wig and started wearing these fake eyebrows and stuff when we played. So like I think at around that time, I don't know, it kind of got a little strange. And at that point, he was like kind of about to have himself sort of removed from the record label. They didn't really want to deal with him anymore, even though he was extremely talented. Chapter 5, the end. This is the end of the road with Benji. So around about this time, it all kind of came crashing down. This is like right when I turned 30. It was 19. No, it wasn't 19 at all. It was 2009 maybe. And we played at Webster Hall, and we were on tour with, I don't know, like Spoon or some like big band that would just fill, you know, 2,000 or 3,000 seat auditoriums every night. And we have 5 people in our band, and it took a lot of work and effort and like just luck and whatever to get to this point, to just be able to open for a band like that on tour for whatever, a month or something. And we got paid $250 a night. And that's divided by 5 people, and that's $50 a piece for waiting around all day to do that. And it was exciting there. And my mom came, and she was like, "Hey, you know what? You know, blah blah. You know, this is amazing. You guys really did it. You know." And she's like, "You must make so much money." And I told her that I told her I was made $50 tonight. And then that was like, this is right before I told her that. So it was like,
She's still smiling.
Still smiling. And then at that point, like I'm on the edge of my 30th birthday, she kind of like gave me hell. And was like, "What are you doing? You went to art school and this and that, and you know, anything. You're 30, you know, like this and that." So that happened, and then I decided that I shouldn't play with Benji anymore. The touring was too much, and at that point, I sort of started my design studio, and was still, you know, at that point I was dating this woman who's a musician, and we were together for a long time. So I was sort of playing, I was playing on the side, and like this is where I guess I sort of, with my design stuff, I guess how they sort of fit in together. Generally speaking, I feel like the playing music, like the eureka moments, like when you're very present and attentive, and you're sort of feeling things like in a real way, and then it's like where you can like really appreciate everything, and when you're collaborating, connecting with other people, that moment is so much more drawn out or longer with music, I feel like. And whereas like the design stuff, I feel like those moments just are like so fleeting, and they last for just like a second, and then the rest of the time you're sort of like beating your head against something until the next sort of moment. I mean, these happen like all throughout. I mean, they're sort of, you know, throughout the sort of process. But I guess that sort of contrast is something that made me, you know, really appreciate music once I was starting to do more design work. I mean, the design sort of component of this will be addressed in a future lecture. So I had my studio, blah, blah, blah. I was dating this girl, and we started a band together. There's only 2 more of these, so we'll get through this. At this point, oh wait, yeah, okay, there's 2 more things. So, anyway, actually this is not very important. I don't have to go through this. part of it. Anyway, I started a band. This is another band with my girlfriend at the time. We made a record that no one ever heard. We played like we played like a handful of shows and recorded this. We spent so long recording this record, and I kind of worked it to death. At this point I was interested in recording, like the process of it. It was sort of technical, like the design, sort of engineering stuff, but it was dealing with sound, so we set up at that same sound stage. I'd been working at this place building sets for like, even after I'd started my design company or studio, I was still working here, just like doing whatever just to make ends meet. So we recorded it in this huge space, and it sounded amazing, and we're still not sure what to do with it. Somewhere in here. So this is kind of segueing from Benji to me playing with a guy named Ian Svenonius, where if you're not familiar with him, you should all kind of check him out. He's just an amazing, kind of person and artist and creator. He's in a ton of bands in DC, like really seminal punk hardcore bands, Nation of Ulysses, Makeup, Weird War, and yeah, he writes books. He had a show on Vice TV called Soft Focus, where he would interview everyone from Henry Rollins to Marky Smith to Steve Malkmus, which is really great. And his book, he writes articles. He's got all kinds of really complicated theories about just how everything works. He can talk to you for a long time about almost anything. So when I was living in Portland, Oregon, I could I worked at this junk store where you could work for $7 an hour in cash, or you could work for $10 an hour in trade. So I mixed it up. So sometimes I got $7 an hour, sometimes I got $10 in trade. So I worked a bunch, and I got these 2 Eames chairs, which I still have today, and furnished it with that. And then this is like this weird table that I made, like kind of when I was playing in bands, and it's not very good. Anyway, he interviews.
Yeah, like CeCe DeVille, from Poison, and also Jane Seymour with her long hair over one shoulder. Actually, in this picture, she had a nice Victorian bun or whatever.
What is rock and roll?
He's really stoned here in this interview. Like at the beginning of it.
Lost babies to it.
Lord Byron's brain was the largest brain ever measured. And, do you think there's a correlation between brain size and the strength of your record?
I'm sure.
Do you agree that your brain measured?
I do have a huge head.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, it's good. It was like a promotional thing we shot for the record when it came out. So I had been friends with Ian for a while and just helped him do different things. I sewed a banner for him when he did a book tour for one of his books called The Psychic Soviet. He's done, he wrote a book called, Supernatural Strategies for Making a Rock and Roll Group, and this is a promotional thing that he did. He also makes these really amazing films.
If you wanna start a rock and roll group, well, let me tell you what you gotta do. You gotta get this book, and you gotta read it too.
But I can't read.
I can't read. We'll get someone to read it for you. They gotta teach you how to slop, teach you how to bop, teach you how to roll, teach you how to stroll. Gonna teach you how to play guitar. Yeah, so you too could be a rock and roll star.
But I can't read.
I can't read. We'll get someone to read it for you. Well, this book, Supernatural Strategies for Making a Rock and Roll Group, is gonna teach you everything that you need to know to create your own successful band. It's got a chapter on drugs. It's got a chapter on naked love. It's got a chapter on driving a car. Yeah, and how to be a big star.
I can't read. I can't read.
Yeah, get someone to read it for you. It's got a chapter on drugs. Yeah, drugs. Naked love. Naked love. It's gonna teach you how to play guitar. Yeah, so you too could be a rock and roll star.
But I can't read.
Yeah, I know you can't read. Just get someone to read it for you. Yeah, supernatural strategies for making a rock and roll group. It's called supernatural strategies by making a rock and roll group. Don't hesitate, buy it now at better stores everywhere. If you want to start rock.
So he's great. If you're not into him, you just look him up. There's like so much stuff. He makes these videos, like long form ones, these short things. He's at interview things. His books are great. He's really amazing. So one of his bands, Chain and the Gang, I showed up to one practice. Like he was like, "Oh, we need a bass player." It was always like this revolving cast of characters, and I don't know, I showed up with my bass and then he was like, "Now you guys switch," and then all of a sudden I was playing drums, which I had never done before. And I played with him like locally at shows, and it was, we'd just go to New York or D.C. or something like that. And I only did one tour. It was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and this is 2015, and this was the last show that I'd ever played live, and I just found this. It was in Los Angeles on January 15th, 2015. Last time I played in front of people, and I was playing drums, and I also had the flu because I was living hard at that point.
I know it's I need mine.
But if you get the record, it's really great. I mean, there's pretty kind of a lo-fi thing, but a lot of the songs, I mean, he's just like singing about really interesting things. Like one of the songs he has is called Certain Kinds of Trash, and it's basically just talks about the stuff that you don't see anymore on the side of the road, like, the insides of a cassette tape, like hanging from a tree, or like, whatever, and he just goes through this list for like 5 minutes of things that you don't see anymore, and it's called Certain Kinds of Trash. So that happened, and then after this, that was the last time I played live. I missed that, but since then, for the last few years, my now ex-girlfriend and I, it's kind of complicated, but we still have this band together, and it started, she'd played forever, and has been playing in bands since like the 90s, and she's a guitarist and has had her own bands, and then she was coming off, a band of hers broke up, and she had all these songs, so she and I sort of started formulating this idea for a band, and it ended up kind of taking shape, and I'm not in it really, but I am in it. So, actually I've never really talked about this in public. So, it's like, there's, the band, to most people, there's three women. Mary plays guitar, Betsy plays bass, and then Laura, who also played with Benji, plays drums. But I'm sort of like the producer, I guess. I don't know how to really describe it, but so I would write the songs with Mary and with Betsy, and then we'd record them, and then I'd record them in the basement and then play on them sometimes, but then I wasn't sort of credited with it. So then it was sort of, to all outward appearances, it was just this band, and it was a kind of like aesthetic choices. The band's called X-Hex, E-X-H-E-X, and we did a record, I'm not in that picture, but it was like, it did really well. It was like, we kind of, like Mary and I, my ex-girlfriend, we kind of did this whole thing, and like, it was kind of our sort of project. I mean, it's become more collaborative with the other members, but the first record was definitely sort of just basically Mary and Betsy and I sort of making this band. And it came out in 2014, and like people loved it. It did really well, 5 stars, 5 out of 5 on the Guardian or whatever. Did that, and it did well on Pitchfork and things like that. So the band toured a lot. Here's a little You can just see what it sounds like. This is one of the videos for songs on the first record. I was playing bass on these So that happened in 2014, and the record did well. And yeah, that takes us sort of to the present. So for like, this has been the story of like my sort of design studio. It goes in between like working on music and then working on design stuff. So it was really professionally irresponsible. I mean, it basically took a year. Like all of 2014 was basically devoted to making this record, and I lost clients and like didn't answer emails, and you know, then I spent a year or so after that kind of like rebuilding. It was like a rebuilding year for me, and now I'm just back in it again. So 2018 was kind of a wash because we decided to make a new record. So basically all of 2018 was devoted to making a new record. That record was just announced on January 9th. It comes out a month from like today, basically, like March 22nd. This is a single from the new record, and this is all stuff that I'm incredibly proud of. This, you know, was even more, I was sort of even more involved in, you know, just programming drums and playing on it, and it was a much more collaborative record between Mary and Betsy and I, and to some degree Laura. But yeah, we spent a long time, like, you know, months and months recording this in our basement and in other places. I'll play a little clip. The record comes out on the 22nd of March. If you want to buy it, it'd be great. I'm sure to have access to it here. Takes us up to the present. I don't know what's next in terms of music. I mean, yeah, I don't know how it's happening. Record's gonna come out. We kind of are living together, and you know, we're talk about music and things like that. I don't know what the future holds for my involvement in this, you know, band, but I'm still a very big part of my life. I still buy a lot of records, and I hope this record sells a lot. And yeah. That's all. That happens. So yeah, I don't know. It's that's a part of me that most people don't get to hear so much about and that I've never talked about so much. So I hope it was informative. And I don't know how it applies to you guys, but maybe it's just, I don't know, diversifying, I guess. Just do whatever you want to do. I don't know, whatever it takes. I don't know, it feels like professionally irresponsible, but I can't imagine not doing both things, and yeah, I don't know.
You've talked about how, and this is a segue for questions. If anybody has questions, this is the moment. You talked about how the energy of making music with other people and how you feed off each other and all that process, and then you contrasted it with design work, and it kind of sounded, and then I know that you work by yourself, so that doing work by yourself in design. Have you ever and you also talked about enjoying studio time and producing music, so do you ever dabble in making music by yourself and just like programming most stuff and composing and just doing like a solo project?
I don't know, I think having the company and just being around other people and just sort of, I don't know, exchanging ideas, I think is really important to me. And now that I'm saying that, I'm like, well, maybe some of my hang-ups with design, has everything to do with the fact that I do it alone for the most part. And I've sort of, again, I'll talk more about this in the design lecture if you are in attendance, but lately I have been looking to collaborate more with other designers, and I've been working with a designer in Oslo, Norway, and we've been taking on projects in the last year or two, and I found that to be, I don't know, I guess in some ways more akin to, I guess, the sort of, my feelings when I'm sort of making music with other people. So I guess, yeah.
Adding on to that, do you think it was a choice for two great parts of your life, being music and being design, one being accompanied and feeding off of people and one being very solitary? Was it a choice? Was it like a conscious decision? Or it just happened?
I don't know, I think it just sort of happened. I mean, I lived in Washington D.C. and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it. I mean, obviously it's like an industry town where there's like people go there. They call it like Hollywood for ugly people. It's just like thing. They do one thing there and it's just that, So it's like there's some practical limitations in Washington D.C. that make it that way. It was never really like a manufacturing center. There's no warehouses and there are no spaces to create things. So whether it's music, I mean, I think the music that happened in the 80s, whether it's the hardcore, I mean, it was sort of a reaction to maybe just being there, and it's kind of a perfect storm. I'm not really sure how that came about, but it's definitely a hard place to like be creative. I feel like the cost of living is pretty high, and there's just no space. And at some points, like even, I would have paid for a studio, but I just couldn't find. It just didn't really exist, and it's hard for bands to find practice spaces and people to paint and make noise at night or whatever. So I think it ended up, and also the fact that I didn't really know anybody. There's not like a community of designers there. There are musicians there. I mean, it's a small, tight-knit group of people, and there are maybe some visual artists there, but there wasn't a community of designers, so it wasn't like obvious for me how to like interface. And I sort of ended up there I just ended up there with this girl, and I was just like, okay, and then it was just
going with the flow.
Yeah, so I ended up just working on my own, just because it was like, it started off like working nights and weekends, and I'm just not going to be like, hey, come, meet somebody and come over to my house, tonight and work and night in my spare bedroom, it's like weird. And also I always felt self-conscious, I guess, of just my own trajectory and how I started my design studio, and having not ever worked with anybody else. Like I never had like an internship, or I never worked with anybody up until like very recently. So I was always just self-conscious. I couldn't figure out like what was normal, and so I think it just happened. And then I looked maybe to music to find more companionship. Like in DC, all my friends are musicians. I still don't know a single designer there, even though I lived there for like 15 years.
¿Qué más?
That was a long one, guys. I'm sorry.
Wait, you gone touring afterwards with like XX?
No, I mean I've driven them around a little bit, like in the van, and let's help them sell merch and stuff like that. But I haven't done any touring with them. I've never played with them or anything like that. I mean, I like writing together.
Would you go back to living in a van for 8 hours, 10 hours?
No, I mean, I have like some sort of like weird morbid fantasy about that. Sometimes, like when shit's not going right, I'm like, God, I wish I was just in the van. Or like I was driving around with a bunch of designers on this workshop last week, and we were in a 15-passenger van, and I had actually, that was the other thing, I had like total like PTSD. I was just like, get me out of here, I just had this freak out sitting in the back, like bumping along. I was like, oh. But I don't know, I don't really miss that part of it.
Yeah.
I do miss playing live, either whether with people or in front of people, but.
Right now that you're teaching, or with your experience teaching, have you seen or getting to know more designers? Have you met more other musician designers and kind of find some similarities or kind of make sense of the whole idea of these two strong creative fields in one person?
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody has something that they're into. I mean, whether it's sort of like, this involves like creation of like this thing that's like consumable by an audience or as like a hard copy of something, and I think whether you're not, I've, designer friends that are really into whatever, I don't know, something, cross-country skiing, or I don't know, something, but that's just because I'm talking to this Norwegian guy who's just like, all of these things that aren't available to us are available to Norwegians. Like, you could be an explorer if you want in Norway, and that's like a viable thing to do. So, I don't know, I think, people are just into things. I'm trying to think, I know a couple people that are like really, I think cooking seems to be a thing that like people are into, like designers are into generally, just because it's sort of painterly and you just kind of do it, and then, you eat it, and then it's gone, and you can do it again the next day, and it's not so precious, but, I don't know. Not music specifically, but.
Is there any special specific music you listen to when you're doing design work?
Well, I make a lot of themed playlists on Spotify. I don't know. I guess it's just listening.
We were checking them out earlier.
Yeah, I have a lot of, either ones about colors or driving or, the sun or flowers or whatever. But that just ends up just a way to categorize things as I hear them. But I would say I've been listening to a lot of sort of like new age, like we're sort of, I don't know, I guess like kind of krautrock, like German stuff. And then sort of that sort of extension of that into more new age things. So things like Edgar, F-R-O-E-S-E, I've never said his name out loud, Edgar Froese, and I don't know, of course, Can and Popova, and I don't know, just these, because they kind of like have this thing, it's very sort of like this, what is it, not like I guess like a mantra, it's just sort of, it just kind of goes straight ahead, and it doesn't require a lot, and things sort of evolve over time. I guess sort of, new age into like ambient stuff. I think if it's a little bit too specific, I think with like words and things, I get a little bit like caught up and I start paying too much attention to it. So it's more instrumental. I think generally instrumental music or stuff that's a little bit more abstract. I think if I'm trying to create something, but if I'm at home listening to music, I just listen to everything pretty much.
Anyone else? Do you feel that your design career kind of very quickly passed your music career, or the kind of attention you get as a designer versus the attention you get as a musician? You don't get a crowd clapping to your songs, but you do get like a lot of like recognition in that sense.
Yeah, I think also just because I was always playing other people's music, so it wasn't, I just never really exercised a lot of ego, I guess, when it came to music, whereas, with my design work, it's all like my name's on it, so it's like my thing, I guess, and I never had a problem being in a sort of a support role. In a lot of ways, I'm sort of more comfortable than sort of being just like, this is me, I want all your attention, like, feed me, I think, yeah. And even with like X-Hex stuff, it's like I'm not, it's just sort of, I'm sort of in the sort of background, working as hard as everybody else in the band, but I'm not sort of out there, and that's fine. And that was just sort of,
maybe not necessarily by design, but it's just like, you know, I have other things I want to do, and I also don't think that I would have wanted to spend that much more time with my girlfriend at the time. We already lived together and worked together, so it was just like, that was something that was like, having our own things was probably healthy, so.
Do these two things merge, or do you find them in yourself like very separate, very, you know, parallel worlds or something?
I don't know, I feel like I'm just getting kind of pulled in both directions. Like I'll be doing one and I'll just get batted up or sick of it, and I'll just immediately want to get pulled and, you know, just do something else. But like now, you know, after spending basically all of 2018 working on this record, writing and recording it, I feel like now I'm just like back in the sort of design world. I feel way more inspired to create, you know, I'm just sort of way more driven, I guess. You know, when I started doing that, like 2017, I've been working a lot. I started to feel a little bit burnt out. So I think they're pretty connected, and I'm a little bit like, I don't really have a music sort of project lined up, I guess. So I'm sort of a little bit nervous about that for the first time in my professional life. I don't really have something waiting for me. So I'm a little
as a
like,
designer or as a musician?
Oh, just as a musician. Like it was always like, you know, okay, just because, I don't know, whatever, my life is different now. I know my life's in limbo, so it's not as clear for a while just being with one person and living in the same town and doing this for a long time. It was like, there was just a rhythm to that, and now it's sort of like, it's getting personal, but yeah, it's just, you know, I don't know. I don't know what's in store for me.
Is there a third thing for you? Like there's music, design?
My bicycle.
Your bicycle?
Yeah, I love riding my bike. That's the only thing yeah. I've always ridden bikes. It's always been like a really important thing for me to do. It's the only thing I can sort of tolerate in terms of like exercise at all. And I don't know, I went down this hole. But I like it because it's like, I think part of it because my life's a little bit in limbo, and also because like just being creative is sort of like nebulous sometimes, and you're trying to I don't really have, I don't know, it's just sort of this cloudy, murky thing. Where like when I'm on my bike, I can go ride like 40 miles or something like that, and there's like a front and a back. You know, you can sort of measure your progress really easily. It's like you just go from here to there, and if you get there, then you did a good job. And it's like there's not many like choices or something, or you just like, I made it home. You're like done, and it's like, you know, where's everything else where you're just like, oh God, should this thing be brown, or like, is it too big? You know, you're just like, I don't know. You know, so I feel like that is like something that's very easy for me to understand, and it's good for my head. It's hard in the winter, but yeah, so I do that a lot. I'll try the third thing.
I don't know if it's gonna be like a little bit too personal, but about mental health, talking about your life as a musician and stuff, don't you get like a little bit of anxiety or something at some parts of your life?
Yeah. I'm grinding my teeth again.
Because I've known that kind of life a little bit. I'm not a musician. My brother's a musician, and I ended up being a designer. He's a musician. But I've seen his life, and I've seen his anxiety, and it's hard.
Yeah.
I'm a designer, and I have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's like, how did you cope with that? How did you get through with that, or?
I don't. I know. I think biking is the only thing that's like really helped me. I've tried like doing yoga and things. I mean, I just bought like a pass to do it. I don't know. It's just like a new thing. I'm gonna try it. I don't really know. I don't know if I react well to that. I think I like. Yeah, I mean, of course you have anxiety. Where it's like, I mean, it's especially being sort of an independent designer. I mean, it's this thing, you know. It's when it's good, it's really good, and when it's bad, it's really bad. And you're just like going along. But then there's waste. I mean, as you know, as I've sort of moved through it, I mean, it's sort of averaged out more. At the beginning, it was like really, those swings are really hard, and now it's a little bit more in the middle. I'm teaching now for the residency at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it's dangerous because for the first time in my life I have like direct deposit, where it's like money gets beamed into my account every 2 weeks, and that's that's like intoxicating. I'm just like, oh man, it's like I can, I know that I'm gonna have this money like next Friday. So that is like in the short term, I was like, oh man, that's like really great. So
Stability, finance.
yeah, I mean it's like pretty. I mean I'm pretty stable, but it's just having an independent studio. It's like
I know
there's a lot of anxiety. You just have to make decisions. You're like, do I build my shop out, or do I do this? Or, you're just constantly sort of making calculations, and there's a lot of anxiety. I don't know, I think you gotta find just something like biking or something.
Yeah, biking a lot. I do that a lot. Riding bike.
We're running a marathon.
Yeah, or running a marathon, or just something that you can do regularly and work towards. Also, like biking, or I don't know if you're training for something, you can also see yourself getting better at it. I could see myself riding farther, or riding the same distances in shorter times, or didn't have to work as hard going up with this hill that I'd always ride up, and that's sort of nice because sometimes it's like you don't really, as an adult, you don't see yourself sort of improving in some things or getting better in the same way. So that's nice to know, even if it's like incremental and has nothing to do with anything. You're like, well, I'm doing something and I'm getting better at it, and
yeah, and it's nice to hear that because I've seen young designers struggling with that stuff. Like they see big designers like, wow, they are so successful and I want to be that. But so they go to the outside world and they're like, I'm having these problems and anxiety. I don't know if they did go through that. So it's nice to hear that it's relatable. We can relate in that aspect of mental health.
Yeah.
Because everybody goes through that.
Yeah,
in
that's
some parts
really
of
important.
time.
Yeah, I mean it is really. I haven't figured it out, but it's definitely like when I'm feeling anxious or bummed out or depressed or whatever. It's like definitely it makes it hard to work and do anything. So it's like you kind of have to take care of it in whatever it takes really. I mean, there's just only so many hours in the day, and it's just like a finite thing. I feel like so you just I don't know. You gotta eat well.
Yeah, Jonah.